Welcome to The Screen Queen, the show where I'll be talking about your favorite show or your favorite movie. You'll just have to find out what you're about to know. This is your Screen Queen, your host, Samantha Parrish. Hello there and welcome back to the show. This is your host on the East Coast, your Screen Queen, Samantha Parrish. So, Roadhouse. Do I have to say anything more? Well, yes I should. Roadhouse has been one of those movies that has a bit of a divisive roller coaster experience with how it's reached certain audiences. Back when it came out in 1989, people were like, I think Swayze's hit the peak of his career. A lot of people felt like it was just another action movie. Well, it is, but it isn't at the same time. Roadhouse was one of those movies that people love to hate, or they hate that they loved it, or they hated that other people loved it, or they loved it just because they loved it. On the last note, I'm one of those people. This film has a special place in my heart for being one of my first few R-rated movies that I watched when I was a little girl. You'll know how I got away with that later on in the story. When I watched it when I was 13 years old, and still watching it as a 27-year-old, I still feel the same way I did when I watched it when I was 13. It did its job. It was a movie about small town troubles that were about to come to an end by this mysterious newcomer to the town. You kind of can't not love a premise like that. As much as action movies can be a bit repetitive, and I've done several episodes about the whole formula to action movies, this is just one of those movies that sticks out above the rest for its history and how it took a while for it to finally age the way it did. With a remake on the way, it is time to visit one of the best parts of Patrick Swayze's career, the movie that gave us another time of our lives. This is Roadhouse. Okay, so starting off this episode, we gotta talk about the guy that I continually praise on this show, and that is Patrick Swayze. I've talked about him on the episode for Dirty Dancing, I talked about him in Ghost, but Roadhouse is another one of those movies that still feels it has the same top-notch Swayze performance. I was talking about this with my best friend Ace prior to recording the episode, and Ace said something that I really have to repeat, where he said, when it comes to Patrick Swayze, he really was all about the craft, and you can see it even in this movie that feels cliched. It has a whole lot of cheesiness to the point that you feel like you're going to be lactose intolerant with all of its cheesiness in there, but you can't help but not love Swayze in it. He brings a layered performance, and he did everything he did for this character that you still kind of felt was a little bit stale, but Patrick Swayze brought him to life the best that he could. He could be given any role at all and still give it this polishment that feels like an 11 out of 10. I miss this man so much. I was watching Red Dawn earlier today before I did this episode and just thought, damn, we lost one of the best actors that we ever had in Hollywood that was so humble and so hardworking, and you can really tell in this movie. He worked his ass off in the other movies when he was in Red Dawn, Dirty Dancing, but Roadhouse was the cream of the crop of how hard he had to work. He even said in this one piece of trivia I found on IMDb that he once commented during the production that he was not sure he would live through the making of this movie. And seeing that, yeah, I totally believe that. He's jumping off of second-story barns. He's having to do all this extraneous, like, martial arts stuff, because whenever a stuntman wasn't in use, he was the one that always went and did a majority of the martial arts work that you see in the movie. And it's so amazing of what he did in this movie for fighting, that the NYPD uses this movie to train the new recruits. I shit you not, I could not believe it when I read that. And looking at that, I believe it. The way that you see Patrick Swayze's character fight in the movie, it does feel like something that you would want to learn in real life. He was able to successfully subdue his opponents in a way that didn't kill them, but he had to do what he could with fighting someone who had a weapon. That is some prime knowledge. I can definitely see why the NYPD looked at this and thought, I think this movie about bad bars is onto something. I think we need to start taking some notes here. But something else that shocked me about this movie is we have another historical element to this. There is a character in the movie named Red Webster, and I need to just go ahead and devote one whole point to that man. Before I came into my little podcast studio, I was refreshing my memory about the actor Red West. I had known some things about him, that he was affiliated with Elvis, and that he had a so-so acting career, but oh my god, this man was a legend. Just gonna say it flat out. He plays an amazing character in the movie, and outside of the movie, this man had a real rotten life for what he went through. Before he was an actor, he was Elvis's bodyguard, and he even wrote a couple of songs for Elvis Presley. It is amazing. He's even written songs for other musicians, and then just decided to be an actor. Like, oh my god, what can't you not do, dude? That's amazing. And Red West had a hell of a time. He was kind of targeted by the father of Elvis Presley back in the 70s when Elvis was not doing so good. And if anyone has seen the new Elvis movie, he was going through some shit. And a lot of people witnessed that. And Red West and his cousin, Sonny West, had witnessed a lot of stuff that Elvis's father did. And they got fired for trying to help Elvis. Which is shitty. Absolutely shitty that he went through that. And so after he got fired, tried to help Elvis, and he wrote an article that you can find that's called Elvis, What Happened? And after that, he was kind of targeted by the media. They're like, what are you trying to do to Elvis? What's going on here? Why are you doing all these things? And the years later, we would finally get the final story, but Red West was the one that was the trailblazer. And amidst all that, he had an amazing career, and yet here he is in Roadhouse, and it's like, shit! Oh my god! It's amazing to see such a man of history in this movie. So if you ever get the chance to rewatch Roadhouse, my god, you're going to have such an appreciation for this actor. And the way that he plays Red Webster, it's amazing. The whole point of Roadhouse, really, to the core, is that it's a film about small town troubles. And the only way you're going to get away with having a movie about small town troubles is that you have to really believe that this town exists, that you see the agriculture and the ruination and knowing the stakes that are at place for that everyone's about to lose the thing that they've been working hard for the past 20, 30, 50 years. And his introduction is amazing when he talks to Patrick Swayze in the scene in the hardware store where he's basically trying to understand Dalton by understanding that he works at the Double Deuce. And it could have been easy to write this character off as just a person who is just a part of the background, someone that's just there to give you your story, your excerpt, kind of like your origin story character that tells you what, instead of seeing it for yourself. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but Red he emanates it. He shows you exactly what you're in for in this town by the best representation from him. And the best line I think he has so far is when he was asked by Dalton, if he's ever been married, and he's like, oh yeah, to an ugly woman. Don't you ever do that. It just takes the energy right out of you. And when Dalton asks him why he stayed, and he said, well, I fell for the place. That has such a blue-collar love that is amazing to see in that movie, that really sells the small-town troubles, that you're going to hate it when he loses this place, because it is his heart and soul is poured into this hardware shop. So to wrap up everything about Red West, he was amazing actor, dearly missed. He was another one that we we've lost from the movie. So it's kind of sad looking at the body count that this film has, that many of the people that you watch are not alive when you watch it. But it's nice that their legacy lives on in there, and it's wonderful that a man like Red West that has such a prolific career is a part of something like Roadhouse, and the fact that Roadhouse got to have that part of history in the movie. Even if it had nothing to do with Elvis, it still, like, echoes that part of Red West's history and his career. So there's something that we see with movies is that, to a degree of it, a lot of it is fake. I mean, it has to be fake. It's a fictional story, or it's a biography movie that has fictional elements. But Roadhouse is one of those movies that there's a lot of real stuff that actually happens in there. There was a part that I was reading about Sam Elliott where he commentated that a lot of the stunts in Roadhouse is real. I mentioned earlier about how Patrick Swayze's stunts led to the NYPD using those abilities to train the new recruits. Well, a lot of people felt like they got trained for this movie. They were trained by a stuntman named Benny the Jet Urquidez. I hope I got that name right. If I didn't, I am so sorry. That man is a holder of 9 black belts, and Urquidez believed in Patrick Swayze's abilities so much that he suggested that Patrick Swayze became a competitive kickboxer. You can find that piece of information on IMDb. Of course, you know, Swayze, he's like, I think I'm good. Like, I really think I'm gonna die during this movie. I've been jumping out of stuff. I got the shit beat out of me by a guy I didn't like, which that next part, that's true. One of my favorite fight scenes, probably one of my many favorite fight scenes in all of the action movies that I watch. I was very surprised to find out that a lot of that is real. You are watching 2 men beat the shit out of each other. And when they were doing the big fight, both men realized that because of their dedication to the stunts, they're like, we can use our hate and use that to make a very authentic fight scene, which that's great, but at the same time, that means they're improvising a lot of stuff that is almost trying to kill them. That's that's a little bad. I kind of wonder to myself if the director was kind of sitting there like, I wonder if I call the police. Like, am I about to witness 2 men kill each other? Is that what's going to happen here? Are they going to become like my name and they're going to be too rowdy now? Which is a funny in-joke because the director's name was Rowdy Harrington. I just figured I'd explain my own joke. Anyway, to me, that astounded me to find that out because I used to train myself to that fight scene. When I was about 15 years old, I just fell in love with the action and the stunt work, knowing, wow, like, that seems like really defensive, and I think I should learn that. So I used to play that every single night, and I used to mirror Patrick Swayze's moves of how he fought Jimmy. I thought that was an amazing fight scene. It really is an underrated fight scene, but at the same time, it kind of feels a little bit scary to watch, knowing the reality these are 2 men that hate each other and they're just really going for it. I mean, I love Patrick Swayze. I love his work ethic, but damn, Patrick. Damn! So, I'd like to take the next segment and just talk about a few of my favorite scenes. I don't know where I would put it in the episode, but this is a very special episode. Well, I say that about a lot of movies, but this particular part is special because of the way Roadhouse impacted me from an early teenager, being 13 years old, watching this movie. And it was a very, very intense movie for me to watch at 13 years old, that I'd always seen mature content, but this was the first time that I was able to comprehend the content. So this movie truly is the marker for when I started to truly love action movies and understand them better. I would be able to look back at the stuff I watched before I was 13 and know, okay, I didn't catch on to that before. So here we are. But besides the action parts, there's also some really enjoyable moments of this film that doesn't really get enough credit for the way that it has a certain charm to some of these characters that really does get overlooked because people spent so much time making fun of this movie that they didn't really get to see these little niches of it. So the first scene I want to talk about is the 2 a.m. coffee date that Dalton and the female character Elizabeth Clay are having. So they're just talking back and forth about professions and everything, and she catches on to him. She's like, man, you lead one crazy life, Dalton. He said, yeah, I do. And during their date, there is a dude that is clearly had one too many at the bar, and he is currently slumping over, and Patrick Swayze catches him in time before he falls flat on his back. And right as Dalton and Elizabeth are leaving, the owner of the diner says, I gotta start charging that bum rent. And Dalton throws down a 20 on the table and said, tonight's rent. I will never forget what my mom said about that scene with the way that the $20 was thrown on the table. That it basically took care of that patron's fee, whatever it is that he ate, and then there's enough left over for a tip, and then whatever's there, like, it can be split between the two. Like, it's up to him. It was just like a nice little act of kindness, and that act of kindness doesn't really get noticed a whole lot in that movie, and I would have never noticed that if it wasn't for my mom. But also, my mom is the reason I have to thank for being introduced to this movie. After she got me watching Dirty Dancing against my will, and I thanked her for showing me something that I didn't want to watch against my will and changed my life, she was in the hunt for finding any other movies to show me. And when she found Roadhouse, I was like, oh my god, that sounds amazing. And then she showed me the trailer, and I'm like, oh my god, where's this been all my life? We gotta watch it. And she's like, I don't know, Sammy. And I'm like, Mom, how dare you? Okay, I didn't want to watch the first one, and I accidentally fell in love with it. And now I'm going to accidentally fall in love with this one, and you take it away from me. What's going on here? And then she's like, you know what? We'll watch it. Like, you're pretty good about watching mature content. Well, that got tested, like, majorly. I remember in the summer when I was sitting down and watching this movie, oh my god, my world got rocked. That was the Roadhouse was the first movie that I ever saw nudity, and that just, like, I was so embarrassed. I'm like, I don't know how to handle this. I'm 13 years old. I don't really looking at my body in the mirror. I don't like this. This is awful. Maybe my mom was right. Maybe I just shouldn't have watched this. And then the scene I'm talking about of what made me so flabbergasted and shy and embarrassed was the scene where how do I say this? What's a nice way to say this? This busty female that's very much interested into Swayze. She's kind of like the... You know, I don't know what the fuck to call her character. This movie, I love it so much, but there are so many characters that really didn't get fully fleshed out that it's kind of hard to give them their name. And this woman, you'd recognize her if you saw the movie, but she's constantly hitting on Dalton. And she goes up on stage, and she does this little skimpy dance, and she's stripping, and that's illegal, you know, in that kind of bar, so he's got to go get her. And so, of course, she starts taking her dress off, and she slaps her right in his face, and then she comes over, and just seeing her full bare chest, I'm just sitting here like, oh my god, my mom walks in this room, I don't know what I'm gonna do, I don't know how to explain this, I don't know what's gonna do. I was just so embarrassed. I kept looking at the screen and looking at the entrance that led to my mom's room, and I'm like, please don't come in this room. I have no way to explain this, and I wouldn't know how to. I don't even want to have to repeat what I just said, what I just saw. Looking back at that scene now, I can laugh at it, remembering how red in the face embarrassed I was, but also knowing, like, I really was not prepared for that kind of content in an R-rated movie that had to do with nudity. I'm glad Roadhouse was that kind of movie, because it was just kind of the careful recklessness is the best way that I can put it, that it didn't go into, like, controversial territory to see something with nudity that would have really scarred me. So I'm glad that Roadhouse was that movie that made me embarrassed but didn't make me scarred. The final scene that I want to talk about, I don't think it gets enough credit. I say that about a lot of films, but the scene I'm talking about in particular doesn't really have any dialogue. It just has a look. near the end of the movie, there is a scene where our main villain, Brad Wesley, is not getting his way at a car dealership, and he has been interrogating and berating the car dealer named Strodemeyer. Now, Strodemeyer is kind of a late character, and it's kind of sad because when I was watching this movie prior to writing this episode, I'm like, you know, they really did not establish these characters very well, that they're great characters, but they weren't really sprinkled in to the point that you really felt that they were part of the town. They just kind of came out of nowhere, like, oh, we're just going to write this person in right now. But the performance of the actor really does save the fact that he was just jammed into the movie halfway through, and you had to know his whole entire history without knowing his entire history. Anyway, back onto the scene. His entire dealership is destroyed by Brad, and everyone's yelling, cheering, ranting, and going on, oh yeah, you're so great, you ruined a man's business! And, the ruins and the wreckage that we have now seen another business fall because of Brad Wesley. And when Strodemeyer looks around at the ruins, this man turns around and he is red in the face. His eyes, oh my god, you could look at this film from like 5 football yards away, and you can still see the red rage in his eyes. And he's emanating so much with just a look. The sadness, the anger, the betrayal, the shock, the embarrassment, there's so many emotions that are just in those eyes. I wish that man got an honorary Oscar just for the look in his eyes. That moment alone solidifies that character. And this really does push Dalton's character to really put in emotion, like something has to be done. There's no way he can stand by anymore now that another man has lost his legacy. And that's the moment that really did it for me, that there was a point to Roadhouse. As much as I loved the movie as a teenager for how it was like this rough and tough, I mean, it's a wonderful rough and tough movie. But to the core of it, it did have a point for the fact that it was these people that were having their lives ruined by another man that refused to know their history. Someone comes along one day and says, hey, everything you worked for is going to be gone. We got to move up in the world. I'm going to help you by getting rid of the very thing that you worked 20 years for. And that really is what Roadhouse is all about. And it just kind of unfortunately gets kind of washed away because of the action. As much as I love it, that is probably the one flaw I would take away from Roadhouse, is that the action overshadows the whole plot. We're so immersed by the action that the story doesn't really get a loud enough voice for what it's about. Kind of really isn't as the fault of the director or the writers. It was just a time. I don't know what will happen with the remake, if they're really gonna explore that topic a little bit more about small town troubles and how someone can come along and try to ruin the legacy of someone's business and everything that they've worked for. We'll see what happens, but I really do hope that that one scene finally gets the vocalizing better than it did in the original Roadhouse. I can't believe I'm saying that, but again, there's always going to be that one scene that you hope is loud enough that it can be able to echo into a remake. And I hope it's that one. Hopefully that made sense. That's just something I kind of thought of off the top of my head. But there is one part of the movie that never fails to make me laugh, and I could not believe... Actually, no, I could believe this when I found that out. The star of the movie, I should say the female star of the movie, Kelly Lynch, and her sex scene with Patrick Swayze is highly talked about by Bill Murray. Yes, that Bill Murray that we all absolutely love, even though he can act like a scuzz bucket at times. But whenever that scene comes on, Bill Murray calls up Kelly Lynch's husband to let him know that this scene is on television. I did a TikTok video about this where I imagine what Bill Murray would say, where he's like, hey man, just want to let you know that I'm watching Roadhouse, and I see, you know, the love of your life is on there, and oh, she looks great, and she's having the time of her life. And I imagine the husband's like, yeah, Bill, yeah, Bill, can you stop it? And he's like, okay, yeah, I'll stop. I'm sure it's gonna come on in a couple of hours, and I'll call you again later. Okay, bye, kisses. For the final point that I want to make about Roadhouse. The legacy has been very interesting to see. That it went from being this movie that people were like, okay, it's another action movie, to giving a little bit more respect. It used to be a punchline in so many movies, and it really was. Roadhouse almost felt like it was a joke about a movie that was made into movies. Central Intelligence did a jab at Roadhouse that felt like a cliche and a joke and a jab at the same time. And of course, then there's the famous Family Guy gag that they did in one of the episodes where they did a little parody of Roadhouse, and I'll be damned, like, I sat there laughing my ass off, but it didn't really get a lot of, like, it didn't get to have a lot of respect, though, which was kind of sad, because to the core of it, it is a very good movie when you take out the action elements. And eventually it did go certain places. It did have a remake that no one likes to talk about, so I won't talk about it. Didn't do the movie any favors except highlighting how good the first one was. And then, of all things, a musical was in the making for Roadhouse. I can't remember on top of my head if it happened or is happening, but it still exists that Roadhouse is going to be a musical. I don't know how the hell they're going to do that. I mean, there's a lot of movies that get made into musicals, some that need it and some that don't. But, like, what? I just want to be a fly on the wall to find out how were they going to make this into a musical. Like, the music in Roadhouse is already good enough with the Jeff Healey band. The music's covered in that movie. We don't need to have any more musical elements to Roadhouse. Come on. Oh my god. But there is something coming up, which is the remake. I talked about this earlier with how there is a hypothesis for what the movie is going to be like, because not much is really known about the remake. I mean, I'm hoping it still follows the same lines along the first movie of it having small town troubles, but it is a remake, so they might have to change the atmosphere, but I hope that the tone is still the same. You can do the story wherever you want, just as long as they still make sure that some of the agriculture elements and having the much needed justice be one of the tones that is still vocalized in the remake. But the cast has officially been released about Roadhouse. And the cast is interesting. I don't know how I feel about that quite yet, just because I need to wait until I see the thing before I can officially give like a solid review about that. But I gotta hand it to them. I'm interested to see how these people are gonna do. So for the role of Dalton will be played by Jake Gyllenhaal. I've known he does a couple of action movies, but I'm intrigued to see how he's gonna bulk up. I know the man does a good job really getting into roles, so I have no doubt that he's really gonna do a good job. I mean, do it for Swayze, man. Come on. Another key actor is a guy named Lucas Gage. Don't really know too much about him, except for the fact that he was in Euphoria and American Vandal. Some other girl named Daniela Melchior. I hope I didn't botch her last name. And Conor McGregor's acting debut is also going to be in this movie. I have no idea what the flim flam flan he is going to be playing, but I have a feeling that he's either going to be a remake of the villain, or he might be Wade. My money is that he's probably going to be Wade's character. You can't not use Conor McGregor for a role that would be kind of equivalent to what the character Wade was like in Roadhouse. But that's my hypothesis. We'll see what happens. Another person in this movie is Billy Magnuson, who, that might be a name you know, that might not be a name you know. I've known this man from the series Maniac. He was also in the Aladdin live action. So that'll be interesting. And everyone else, I don't know anybody. So people might be getting their name in this movie. So that'll be nice. But so far, that's all I know. It just says remake of 1989 Roadhouse about a bouncer at a rowdy bar. It still says post-production. There is no set date quite yet, so we'll see what happens. But so far from what I know, it is wrapped up from the interview I saw with Conor McGregor when he was on on an interview the other night talking about one of the charities that he's a part of and said, hey, got a movie I'm in called Roadhouse. So I'm like, excuse me? I've been waiting to hear about this. Can I have more details? Well, okay, I'll just live in anxious anticipation then. Okay. So, but that'll be fun. That'll be fun. So for the final words I have about Roadhouse, if it wasn't for Roadhouse, I don't think I would have loved the action genre as much as I do. I have so much to thank for this movie that we all have that certain movie that does something for us and it's special to us in our own way. And Roadhouse is that movie for me that it hit so many notes for me growing up that it wasn't one of these things that changed my life because of its morals and values, because let's be honest, there's not a whole lot of morals and values in this whole thing. It just has a small town trouble story with a lot of action and it's great. But that's what I love about that. I really got to enjoy this when I was a teenager, and it got to grow up with me. I got to learn to fight because of this movie. There are so many stories I loved hearing about this movie, and I get to share those stories, and it's been such an honor that I finally get to share the stories of Roadhouse, of how it was made, what it's going on with it today, and how much it impacted me today. And I got to share all those stories for the first time, and it's amazing that I got to do that. So thank you so much for being here for this episode where I got to go down memory lane. So that is officially a wrap on the Roadhouse episode. But before we find out what the next episode is going to be on the Screen Queen show, I have an announcement that I'd like to make, but if you don't want to hear the announcement and you just want to skip to the good part and find out what the next episode is, I got you covered. There's a timestamp in the description box that you can go ahead and skip to. It won't hurt my feelings one bit. You came here for the movies, not the announcements. Anyway, so a lot of my listeners know about the series that I have been republishing, how I had to take my first book and split it into 3 parts. And it's been a painstaking and rewarding process to get that done. And I finally have the last 3rd part of the book made into part 3. And I've been working tirelessly on this thing. Working until 1 o'clock in the morning on it. And it is going to be set to be released on March 31st. So with that said, I need to devote all of that time to the marketing, the last minute changes, the little things that I might have not noticed before. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. It's like being, a one-person show, like having to do this, and this, and I have acquired a lot of help that's going to be getting me through this process, so I need to take time away from the show to take the time with them to help me get this book out the door so I can finally have the whole damn thing done and move on to my other books. So, I will be back with a new episode. I'm going to go ahead and give you the specific date so you know when my return is going to be. So let's see here. I will be back on the 2nd of April. So the day after April Fool's Day. Isn't that wonderful? Oh my god. I'll definitely miss the show during that time, but I appreciate all those that have been mainstayers of the show that have understood the different criterias that I go into with doing podcasting and being an author. So I appreciate everyone's patience with me as I take time away to work on my pride and joy. So with that said, we are about to find out what the next episode is going to be on the Screen Queen. However, April is my birthday month. So this selection that I'm picking from here is an entire selection of all of my favorite movies and TV shows. Even though we've already covered, a lot of my favorite movies and TV shows, now you really get to have a whole month and get to find out this way than having to find out through, the spontaneous lotto system. So this is going to be a real fun. Think of it as a birthday present to myself that I get to present to you. So we both get to share the gift. Isn't that wonderful? Okay. So, we're about to find out what the first episode is going to be for the birthday series on the Screen Queen. Here we go. Let me just... Okay. What do I got? You guys don't... Oh my god, why? Oh! birthday series for the Screen Queen is going to be To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. Oh my god. Oh my god, that's gonna be so great. Oh my lord, that is an amazing way to kick off the series. Oh my god, I think there's a lot to get into for that episode, so that'll be fun. Alright everyone, stay safe, stay good. Otherwise, it's gonna be my way or the highway. It's just what it's gonna have to be, If you want to catch up with me in between uploads to talk about the episodes, to talk about anything, you want to say hi, you can find me on my Instagram at the Queen of the Screen, where I have a multitude of movie stuff on there. And if you would like to see other movie-related stuff on other social media accounts, you can find me on my TikTok at the Mystical Space Switch. And one more plug-in. If you would like to see my series in Glorious Ink, you can also find that in the description box, and that will take you to my book series. I will be back in April with the next episode. This is your Screen Queen, signing off. Bye-bye!